Do you love horror? Do you like to sit in the dark and watch uncut, ad-free thrillers and suspense movies, all the while wondering if there is something standing behind you or waiting for you under your bed? Do you shudder at the thought of being watched in the early morning hours? Or do you crave the suspense? The blood, the gore, the twists and turns that make your hands tremble on the remote. For me, I love the feeling. The sensation of fear and horror that Shudder provides is unmatched. Shudder is a premium streaming service devoted exclusively to horror and thrillers. It provides hours of killer content added weekly. My favorite Shudder exclusive movie is directed by Rob Zombie. It's called 31. You should check it out. It's a gritty, gruesome slasher. Shudder provides tons of movies from the supernatural, sci-fi, documentary, to creature features such as Dark Floors or my personal favorite, The Descent. But the best part of Shudder? Well, they're streaming Channel Zero. Oh, you don't know what Channel Zero is? Well, certainly you have heard of the creepypastas called Candle Cove and No End House. Yeah, well, that's right. The people behind Channel Zero take well-known creepypastas and turn them into movies for our enjoyment. Try Shudder now with a 30-day free trial. Using the code Ghost Stories. Don't turn your lights off. It was supposed to be a normal day at work. Unfortunately, things are never that easy when you work as a search and rescue officer. Tonight, it was supposed to be my 3rd anniversary date with Susan, and I wanted to propose. Unfortunately, life had other plans for me. Plans that did not include Susan, but that had me having a date with the forest in a flashing blue light. You know, there's a point in every man's life where even if his job is incredibly fulfilling, he'll come to hate it for a reason or another. And that point is now. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, I love my job. I love the sentiment I get when we save people from falling off a cliff or that we're lost in the forest. I mean, I really love it. I do. But tonight, I hate it. Tonight, I wanted nothing more than to spend my time with my girlfriend and just chill out. And instead, I'm going after a flashing blue light in the woods, and I can't help but think that they could have waited until the next day. And I know it's wrong and fucked up, but hey, you know what? A guy needs a break sometimes. Needless to say, Susan was as encouraging as ever, and told me I was a hero and that she'd wait for me to get home to give me my surprise. She doesn't realize how much it makes me want to be back home instead of here, hearing her say that. So here I am, putting on my uniform, heavy boots, and packing the necessary survival kit to probably save an old hunter who got his leg trapped somewhere. I and my team get into the van and we drive to the coordinates that we were given. And none of us looked excited. It's a region we know. We've been there several times, and 9 times out of 10, it's a drunken dude who lost his way after taking a piss too far from the trail. We'd all rather be doing something else, really, but at least we will get to feel proud that we saved another person's life. So, here we are. We get to the edge of the forest. We do the usual fist bumps and high fives and then bury ourselves in. We cover a distance of about 50 feet, keeping about 10 feet or so between each other. Never lose track of your mate's flashlight when you're doing a search and rescue or recovery, or you might end up needing rescue yourself. Anyway, about 20 minutes deep in the forest, I finally noticed the blue light. Call out to the boys, "Boys, 10 o'clock. The flashlights turn towards me and I point towards the flashing blue light. And when they stop blinding me, I return my attention to the strange blue light. There's a knot in my stomach the second I see it. And now that I'm looking at it thoroughly, I realize it's no ordinary light. It resembles nothing I'd ever seen before. It doesn't even seem close to anything like a lamp or a torch, or even a goddamned LED flashlight. It's blue, and it looks like it's dancing, like the flames of a fire, except in midair. I asked the other guys, "Hey, have you seen that?" I get a few answers, but most of the guys have already sealed their lips and contemplated the idea of just getting the hell out of here. Now, I wish I had looser morals. I might be an asshole in thoughts, but I'm all for doing my duty. And I'd never leave a job unless I felt like my own life was in danger. That feeling creeping into the pit of my stomach is similar to dread. But I don't feel threatened, surprisingly. More like I'm about to discover something out of this world. Or maybe I've already found it. And so, I follow this will-o'-the-wisp kind of flashing blue light as it dances its way through the forest. The closer I get to it, the colder I get. And strangely enough, my back is sweating profusely, and I could feel my shirt sticking to my skin. Every now and then, I glance sideways to make sure my team's still with me, and each time, I heave a sigh of relief realizing that they are. The more nervous of us have already gotten a machete out of their backpack, and quite honestly, I couldn't blame them. My throat is dry, and I don't remember a time I felt so frightened in my life. I'm terrified, but at the same time, the blue light does not feel like it's threatening. It's actually leading me somewhere. It wants me to find something. I wipe my brows and keep advancing, thinking about how weird it is that I feel so cold despite the hot humidity of the night. The tip of my fingers feels numb, and my heart is beating faster than the drums in a heavy metal song. And it stops, and then we all stop. I realize my boys have gotten closer too, way closer. I mean, we're all standing in a line atop of this cliff while staring at the strange floating flame dancing midair. I swallow thickly and finally manage to rip my gaze away long enough that I could stare at the bottom of the cliff. There's something there amidst the branches, rocks, and vegetation. There's a droplet of sweat rolling down the side of my face in a painstakingly slow descent to my jawline. I could feel it tickle my pores as my hair stands on end at the sight I'm giving. It's still moving. Or is it just spasms? I don't know, but we had to act fast. Down there, my boys finally break through the spell and all point their flashlight to the bottom of the cliff, about 40 feet from our position. We get our gear and start to climb down, knowing that now every minute counts. When we finally reach him, we realize it's way too late. The man's face is indecipherable, and the movements we saw were nothing more than the small rodent scavengers already pecking at its flesh. The corpse had been there for a couple of days, judging from the smell and the amount of flies and scavenger bugs on it. He was missing an arm, and there was a hole on the side of his belly the size of my fist. and left side had a couple of bites and claw marks that indicated the man was attacked. And I hear one of my mates barf on the left as another one gets a plastic bag from his backpack. And I was carrying the stretcher. And just then, I look up, and the blue light's just vanishing into thin air. In all my years since that incident, I've never seen anything else like it, nor has any of my fellow rescuers. This is actually my friend Adam's story. I'm telling it because, he has some serious PTSD over it and would rather just push it off. The phone rang loud and clear at the ranger's office this afternoon. A couple of mid-40 hikers had stumbled upon a dilapidated 18-wheeler big rig in the woods. Adam took the coordinates from the couple and told them that they would wait for search and rescue. They would be there within the hour and the authorities would take their deposition. He then asked them what company the 18-wheeler belonged to, and they told him there was no brand visible, just the usual red cabin. And, sure, it wasn't too far from the road, but it was just far enough in that it couldn't be seen from it. However, a truck that size, it was surprising no one reported it missing. After hanging up, Adam raised from his chair and stretched. He needed to tell his team about it, and considering it was an 18-wheeler, he probably needed to select one or two more guys than usual. And not knowing what the truck was transporting was a bit bothersome after all. Could be anything. He briefly remembered once having to deal with wounded animals because a transport from a pharmaceutical business had flipped over. Poor guys were probably en route to being euthanized anyway, and most of them had wounds that had been made way before the crash. Shaking his head, he wiped that from his memory and went to the communal room to find the rest of his team playing cards. It had been pretty calm lately at the Rangers Center, so the guys were taking it easy. And so Adam told them, "We got a call, let's pack up." Adam replaced his cap on his head and watched them as they all groaned and got up from their seats. And thankfully, 2 seconds later, none of them were thinking about the card game and were back in search and rescue mode. These guys might be slackers when it's easy, but when it comes to work, they know what they're about. Getting into the truck, Adam briefly described their mission of the day. There was a couple of hikers waiting for them near a flipped 18-wheeler, none too far from Route 63, and they weren't sure if they saw the driver or not since the cabin was pretty much a total loss, which meant that they had to get ready to find a mangled corpse in the driver's seat. It took about 40 minutes to get to the location, and the first thing Adam noticed was the broken rail in one of the sharp turns. Did nobody use that road this morning? While he had to admit it was quite the secluded area, the tire marks on the concrete combined with the broken rail should have been enough to raise questions in any drivers passing by. In any case, it was now their job, and not the authorities. And talking about the authorities, they came, and they waited for the deposition of the couple. Adam told them to park next to them and wait for his team to come back, just in case the cargo's something dangerous. Now, Adam said that there was a fat cop who didn't seem to mind waiting in the car. In fact, he looked quite happy about the fact he wouldn't have to get down into the forest and that the job was someone else's. So Adam packed his stuff and locked the truck before gesturing to his men to follow him. Fortunately, they didn't need any special equipment to follow the trail left behind the truck, and it didn't take long to find it either. Adam went directly to the couple and told them to climb back, following the trail. cop was waiting for them to take their report, and after that, they would be free to spend the rest of their day as they so desired. Adam turned to Mark, who was currently checking the truck's cabin. Nodding negatively, Mark also told him that he didn't see anybody inside. The truck was empty, which was nearly impossible because the doors were so fucked. There was no way whoever was driving managed to get out after the crash. Unless the guy had thrown himself out before the crash. He was still in there, probably doing the bloody pancake all over the dash, windshield, and seats. We'll leave the job of figuring out where the driver went to the cops. It's not our area of expertise. Let's see what's in the cargo first. We don't want another pharma event, if you know what I mean. The guys nodded silently, and Adam got a torch so that they could break the lock and open the back door. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, Adam glanced up at the blue sky and the sun's high up. It was easily going to reach 90 degrees, and the humidex factor definitely wasn't helping. Sighing, he put on a mask and started torching the lock so that they could get in. Nothing in his career could have gotten him prepared for what they were going to find inside. As he took off his mask, his nose was assaulted with the stench of rotting meat, and when his eyes locked onto the meat hooks, he realized this was a butcher's truck. It was surprising how that there was no brand on the side of the 18-wheeler, though. His eyes adjusted to the dim lighting inside the truck pretty fast, and he climbed in, unaware yet that his discovery would be of the most gruesome fashion. The air was still cold. Despite the crash and the broken refrigeration system, the heat of the day hadn't gotten yet inside the truck, and yet the smell was pungent. Having worked in a butcher's shop when he was younger, he couldn't remember the smell being this strong. It's only when he walked a few feet in that he realized that this was no ordinary meat hanging from the hooks. Torsos. A lot of them, with the breasts and limbs cut off. He took the time to count, and he might have gotten up to 50. Adam lost his footing and fell, his hand smashing right into one of the bodies. He barely made it out of the truck before his breakfast bagel went back the way it came from. The cargo was filled with human bodies that had been prepared like pigs at a butcher's shop, and the driver was nowhere to be found. And to think, things had been so slow at the Rangers Center that day. Minnesota, one of the most boring states where nothing ever happens besides domestic violence cases and drugged-up teenagers losing their way in cornfields after a huge LSD trip. Search and rescue here, and we also call it SAR or SAR. Never had to do much besides the occasional search for a lost teen or rescue for canoe enthusiast whose canoe flipped over on the Minnesota River. It's a pretty boring and calm job if anyone asked Jordan. So when his rescue team was called that day to get a man that had fallen into a well in one of the many agricultural sites that filled the state of Minnesota, well, he was admittedly a little thrilled. Falling into a well wasn't such a common occurrence, and maybe this time he'd get a little media coverage. Not that he wanted to be on TV that bad, but it would at least make it look like his life was just a little exciting. Jordan and 2 other members of the Rangers Search and Rescue Center were allowed to take the helicopters so that they could get to the location faster. Considering it was a matter of life and death, they got the green light to use the bird. Jokes were exchanged on board, and bets were placed on the state of the man they'd find. Jordan bet on a concussion and a broken leg, Michael on 2 broken legs and a few bruises, and Gary bet on a few bumps and bruises, and an inability to climb the well. The closest would have to pay the celebratory beers and wings at the local pub. They quickly reached their destination and found the well fast. Jordan called out the name of the guy who'd called them earlier, only to be met without an answer. Flashing a grin to his colleagues, he teased them. "Sounds like someone passed out in there. They might have a concussion, who knows?" Michael slammed his fist on his shoulder and Jordan laughed like an idiot. "We're coming for you. Hold on." Jordan yelled into the well and locked the straps securely around his thighs and belt. Michael locked him to the rope, and they prepared to allow him to descend into the well. Jordan asked the man if he was still awake, but again, he was met with silence. Under his breath, he muttered a small, "I love the smell of free wings and beer," as the 2 other members of his team slowly helped him down the well. Once his feet touched the ground, he realized something was off. First, there was absolutely no one here but him. Jordan called the man's name and got no answer. The well wasn't that large either, but he quickly noticed that the hole wasn't all there was to it. Michael called for him, and Jordan told him to wait. That he found something, and on his left, there was a passage. This was no ordinary well. "Give me rope. There's something down here." Swallowing heavily, he started walking down the passage. Every now and then, his flashlight illuminated markings on the walls. They flashed in a strange green glow, and the writing was definitely not English. Hieroglyphs? Korean symbols? What would the Egyptians be doing in Minnesota? No, this couldn't be, and the writing didn't look like anything he'd ever seen. And it almost seemed otherworldly. A knot formed in his throat as he realized that this wasn't an ordinary search and rescue. His thrill turned to fright as he reached the end of the passage and found the man he was looking for. In the corpse's hand, a radio that was probably as old as the First World War. How did it even manage to call his station? How did his body, that is so obviously dead since a while, manage to call them? And how long had he been dead exactly? His radio, at least almost a century old, but his body said an hour ago. His skin wasn't in putrefaction, but everything about the way the man was dressed and the radio he held told him another story. Maybe time wasn't moving the same way under those strange green markings. The corpse's gaze was immobilized towards the ceiling of the cave, and Jordan dreaded looking at it. Swallowing heavily, he moved his flashlight toward the ceiling, only to see the strange glow of those green markings again. The sound of something moving off the ground in front of him had him moving his flashlight just as fast, and he realized quickly that the corpse was now staring at him, its eyes glowing green like the markings. Jordan didn't wait. He took his legs and ran the other way around, his screams echoing against the rocky walls of the well as his men helped him up at an incredible speed. He clawed at the wall to help himself up faster, and once he was back on secure land, he would have never seen a man take off his equipment faster. And a half an hour later, every branch of the government's authority was there. Local cops, FBI, CIA, you name it, they were there. Needless to say, nobody had free wings and beers that night. only a cold reality sandwich and long hours of interrogation by the many cops that wanted to find a hole in their story. When the cops realized they couldn't get anything more out of them, they were released, with an added bonus. Jordan and the rest of his team received a lot of cash in exchange for their silence. And nobody knows what happened with that well in Minnesota. Especially with Jordan. Don't ask him, unless he is really drunk. After all, that's how he told me.